the camera is a machine that, especially if it's handheld, it is stuck with you as you move through the world. And even if you move on a tripod or whatever, that's moving with you through the world. And you are placing yourself in a certain relationship to the things of the world. And that tells us about what you are and who you are as a photographer, as a maker. So if you're making a lot of distant photographs, I think you got to think about that, and if you're making a lot of close up, you got to think about that. And like I said, for me, this process was then saying, I'm making a lot of pictures with mostly dead space in them. Without getting too heavily metaphorical on yourself, I was feeling a certain distance from the world that I needed to think about. Great, yeah. So this is my first monograph. It's with the publisher is called The Ice Plant, and that is Trisha Gabriel and Mike Slack, who are in Los Angeles. But to go back, so this is probably at the end of tail end of grad school, and then in the time after grad school is when I was making these pictures. And sometimes, and I now that I work a lot with students, I'm like, do not be afraid to say the dumbest things about your pictures, because it really helped me. And all I got to tell you is the dumbest thing was that I was learning that, especially this was all that Mamiya handheld, right? That 6.7. If you resolutely keep your camera if you're shooting vertically, if you do not raise your camera at all, you're going to get a lot of foreground, and that's true and especially with like any 2:3 aspect ratio. But this one, I was making a bunch of photographs that I had a lot of dead space in the front of them, and I just kept doing it, and I was grappling with it, and I said, well, this is weird, but I was like, well, I'm doing it. So, and that sort of, I'll tell you, that sort of idea has now permeated everything I do, is that I'm trying to learn from the pictures I make and not try to resist them, at least at first. So anyway, that's a little bit of overtalk tell you that.
Okay. Talk to me about that.
Yeah.
Learn from the images that you make. What are you learning?
Yeah. So I use this metaphor now, and
are you there?
I've never been in analysis, but what I understand from talk therapy is that you talk a lot. Somebody else kind of listens and says, here's what I hear you saying. This model sounds really interesting to me, because what I do is I make tons of photographs, and, I am not scared of wasting film. And what I need to do then is later to kind of say, why am I making a certain kind of picture? Why are my edges this way? Why is there this much distance? And these are all formal things. One could also say, well, why am I, taking pictures of roads? Or, so you could also kind of ask yourself subject matter. You can ask yourself all these questions. And I think at some point, you kind of got to yank yourself out of yourself and try to be objective about your subjectivity, if that makes any sense. But really look hard on the distance, you're placing yourself with your world, because my whole thing about photography now is that the camera is a machine that, especially if it's handheld, it is stuck with you as you move through the world. And even if you move on a tripod or whatever, that's moving with you through the world. And you are placing yourself in a certain relationship to the things of the world. And that tells us about what you are and who you are as a photographer, as a maker. So if you're making a lot of distant photographs, I think you got to think about that, and if you're making a lot of close up, you got to think about that. And like I said, for me, this process was then saying, I'm making a lot of pictures with mostly dead space in them. Without getting too heavily metaphorical on yourself, I was feeling a certain distance from the world that I needed to think about. So, and that did not happen in horizontal pictures. Okay. So then again, this is where we're just talking very, plain, easy to understand terms. That doesn't happen, but it needed vertical pictures. And so for anyone who hasn't seen this, and I will say also, for anyone who's going to hear the audio version of this, all of these pictures that we're going to discuss today are on my website, and we'll give you the address at the end. So if you'd like to see the pictures, they're all there. But what ended up for Local Objects is that this is a book entirely of vertical pictures, because that's what I, one day decided that it had to be. So anyway, we're looking right now at the cover, which is just a picture of a kind of a divided field with some corn. It's a very simple picture. I have to tell you, the moment the Ice Plant showed me the first choice for the cover and they picked that picture, I was kind of shocked, because I thought it was not I loved the picture, but I didn't think it was a cover picture. And then like a minute later, I was like, I was so happy that they trusted that picture enough. So that was a really cool thing, just as a little kind of publishing note. But I'll move through the book a little bit here. It's pretty simple pictures. Well, maybe we'll just go, I don't know, 5 or 8 or 10 pictures deep into
Yeah, let's pick a few of them that you think are important to you. So, as far as stand out to you that really speak to your aesthetic, I think you have a very interesting visual language for sure. And one of the things I did notice was the open spaces, but I also noticed geometry. I noticed you exploring your eye and the frame a little bit and lining it up. And so I thought you had a very interesting aesthetic. And so pick out a few that you like, and then I'm going to ask you the metaphors. So I want to know. I want to get deep with you. I don't want to just talk technique here. Okay.
Oh yeah, no. You will rarely hear me talk technique, other than where technique. But listen, I mean, also I should say I truly believe that the way that we use the machine is the way that we look at the world. So then insofar as technique is important to that, but okay. So this is the first picture in the book. As you can see, just just a lot. Half of it is just this kind of dead area, and then there's not even much going on above. One thing I would say that informs everything, we are form-making creatures, even non-artists, everyone, walking around, we're just kind of, there's all this chaos outside of us, right? We're just kind of like bringing it into some sort of semblance that we as like an organism can use. We can walk through the world. We can, make sense of it. And, but if, a picture or a poem or something, that is sort of a little bit of a formal distillation for me, my favorite poet, Wallace Stevens, he just called it a sudden rightness. And I've always loved that phrase. It's like for some moment, like something came into a rightness. And for us, as photographers, that's a formal rightness to me. It's a balance in the picture. It's edges. It's all of these kind of things working together. So it doesn't have to be dramatic subject matter. It's more about do we have a balance here? So the first picture, I'll maybe go through a couple. Maybe the second picture is just a sort of a parking lot and the slabs of the cement that lead toward the viewer that would be where people would park. And I just it was just this form that kind of became a little sinuous here against the poles. And so these again, for me, it's just what Stevens would call the sudden rightness. It's like the world sort of makes sense for just a fleeting kind of moment. And again. So third picture, this picture is of some various different kinds of wires that most of them are sort of, they're guide wires or holding wires for larger poles. But this is where they're just sort of stuck in the ground. And, in my head, I'd say, well, the world and the sky are sort of tethered together by all these wires, that are all kind of askew to one another. And I like that idea. Let's go to
this whole series. This whole series was in Central Illinois, where you're from.
Oh, well, this is all within walking distance. Actually, so I should tell you,
is this a small town?
Yeah, small town. One of my sisters lives outside of Pittsburgh, though, and I think there's 3 or 4 pictures from there in here. Oh, okay. So, yeah.
Is that where you like to be?
Oh, I love it.
There's like one stoplight kind of place.
Like I said, the more unremarkable on its own, probably the better for me.
Interesting.
Okay, I'm going to do a little detour here because this is something that's also important for everything.
Sure.
My whole thing is that, listen, we are chaos inside. There's so much going on in our emotions and our thoughts and our feelings and what we've gained and lost in our lives, and the world is chaos outside. And we're just constantly trying to make bring that together, make some sense of that. And what I found, though, is, not to travel to bunches of different places, but to stick with one place now for many years, and literally within a few counties when we're driving around, and even more generally, just a walking distance, because if I can kind of calm down that chaos of the external a little bit, right? I'm not looking at new subject matter all the time. In fact, I'm looking at the same stuff, but I'm seeing it over seasons. I'm seeing it as the light changes, as the clouds blow, all that kind of stuff. But what it does, if I can calm that exterior variable down a little bit, it helps me look at the internal variables and see, because this is the gist of photography for me, is like, how do you bring what's inside you together with what's in the world using this machine that we have, this very peculiar kind of machine. And so I can start to think about, well, a year ago, this person was in my life, and now he or she is no longer, and that's a loss. Or guess what? I've gained so much in this. Like I'm a different person now, and not in that specificity, but like that all comes through. Like you're a different picture maker than you were a year ago, than you were 5 years ago. I will tell you, if I tried to make local objects pictures again, I could not. Like, and I'm happy with that. Like, I'm just not seeing the world in the same way. I'm not that person anymore, and that feels good. I don't regret that. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in relation to another project. But for example, This picture that we're looking at now is just it's a back. It's not a backboard, but it's the fencing behind a where somebody throws a shot put, and it's just to keep protect the crowd behind them. So but it just has these very strange kind of undulations in how they built it. And if you stand at one exact place, this sort of creates this this pattern. And again, it's just like it's pattern finding. It's kind of things locking in and sort of making a little bit of sense. And then I'm going to do one last picture. This is the one. This is one of the most important pictures to me too. It's a picture of we're actually out in the middle of some farm fields, but by a rail line, and there are some rails sitting by the main rail line that are meant to be eventually switched out and put into the line, but they've been kind of left in a bit of a haphazard pattern. But then you'll kind of walk towards them, and suddenly like at one moment the pattern sort of resolves, and it kind of creates a sensible sort of formal thing for you. And so again, like just to go back to that, it's a sudden rightness. Like it just felt like there's the moment where like me and the thing are locking together. So that and we you can see many more pictures in the book and see it on my website. But this would kind of give you the I guess sort of the template or sort of the lay of the land for how a lot of the book operates. Now, the one thing I will tell you real quickly, again, I'll move forward, is that it is sort of grounded in some 2 and 3 picture spreads, which which obviously these pictures were made within seconds of each other, because I did want to also sort of ground it in a movement in the world and sort of a walking in the world, so that it wasn't just a bunch of pictures, but that it really did sort of ground itself in this movement through the world.